Hey everybody, we're going to be looking at lesson 91 today. The title of the lesson is Evaluations with Signed Numbers. And there's a second part that we're also going to be looking at here where we are going to be looking at signed numbers without the use of parentheses. So I'm going to go to the bottom of my sheet here, kind of act as though it's a whiteboard. You do not have to write down what I'm about to write down, but I just want to recall something with you, something that we've already been accustomed to doing. Just a little bit of a reminder here. We've been able to evaluate an expression such as x minus x times y minus y if, say, a is supposed to be equal to 2, x, not a. X is equal to 2 and y is equal to 3. Those are both positive, and we know how to do that. We would just stick in our numbers for our variables here, like so. And we would evaluate that. We would do our multiplication first. So now I have 2 minus 6 minus 3. And we've worked this through to the end. And we would end up with negative 2 plus a negative 6 plus a negative 3. And we end up with 2 plus a negative 9. And our answer becomes negative 7. Okay, so we've done that where we've dealt with positive numbers to substitute into our variables. Okay, today, we're going to be looking at a very similar concept. The only difference is the numbers that we're going to be substituting in for x and y happen to be negative. So let's go ahead and write some notes on how to do this. Really, it's the same way, but I want us to take some notes on it anyway. So the first thing that we do is we set up parentheses to represent each variable. So we're going to write a set of parentheses for x. We're going to fill in the value in just a moment. We're going to put our subtraction sign here, a parenthesis for x, a parenthesis for y. Those are being multiplied, and then subtracting y. Now we're going to fill in our parentheses with the proper numbers. Okay, so x is negative 2, x is negative 2, y is negative 3, and y is negative 3. Make sure you're writing this into your notes, please. Okay, so now we have filled in the proper numbers, and then the last thing we do to solve it is we just use our PEMDAS rules to figure out what comes first. Okay, so let's look at what's going on. I see subtraction, I see multiplication, and I see more subtraction. So obviously, in the order of PEMDAS, order of operations, we're going to multiply first. So where's our multiplication? It's right here. So I'm going to rewrite everything as it stands, except for I'm going to perform the negative 2 times a negative 3, and I'm going to get a positive 6 here. And then I'm still, wow, I wonder what that was. Changed it right to a 0. And we're going to leave this subtraction of a negative 3. Now, let's go ahead and deal with the negative 2. We can add left to right, or I can put together the numbers, signed numbers, but first we're going to take care of the subtraction that we see here. So I have negative 2 and I have subtraction, and we know we have to change that to addition of the opposite. Same thing for the subtraction here. I'm going to change it to addition of the opposite. Now I can put together what I have. I have a negative 8 plus a positive 3, and my answer becomes negative 5. And that's how we would work out a problem like that. Okay, so remember, we did the parentheses first, and then we filled in the numbers, and then we performed our operation using PEMDAS. Okay, so those are the three things that we did there. Now, sometimes signed numbers are written without parentheses. Now, in example 2, you're going to see some parentheses there, but I'm going to go down to the bottom and I'm going to do an example on the whiteboard first before we move to that. So let's go ahead and get this out of the way. Perfect. Okay, so let's look at this one together before we build in our notes. This is just for me to show you and talk through. So if I have negative 3 plus 4 minus 5 minus 2, I have no parentheses here, but I need to know exactly what's going on with each one of my signs and each one of my numbers. So I'm going to categorize them. So I start with a negative 3. I'm adding 4 I'm subtracting 5, and I'm subtracting 2. Now we can simply add algebraically. So I'm going to go from left to right. I'm going to say I have a negative 3 plus a 4. That gives me a positive 1. And then I am going to do my negative 5 minus 2. Okay, so I'm looking at the sign like a negative sign. It's attached to the 5. So it's negative 5 minus 2. That's going to give me a minus 7 or a negative 7. Now my answer becomes negative 6 here. Another way that we can think about doing this, I'm going to go ahead and divide those out again, just as I did the first time, is I can use my associative property to find the sign numbers that have the same signs, and I can pull those out first. So I only have one positive here, so I'm going to pull that baby right out there. And then I'm going to take my 3, my negative 3, my minus 5, or a negative 5, and my negative 2, and I'm going to write those together here. So I have minus 3, minus 5, minus 2. Okay, so I look at this like I've got 4, and then I'm going to put these negative numbers together. Let's add those up. I have 3 and 5 is 8, 9, 10, subtracting 10, and look, I get the same exact answer. Okay, and that's without using parentheses. We don't change anything to addition of the opposite. We just go from left to right, learning how to use those signs to our benefit. So let's look at example 2 now. So I have negative 2 plus 3 times a negative 2 minus 2 minus 2 times a positive 4. So keep in mind, yes, we're talking about simplifying expressions without parentheses, but these parentheses that you see here are acting as multiplication signs. They're not parentheses around just a number standing on its own. So let's go ahead and categorize these like we did before. So I have a negative 2 plus 3 times a negative 2, that goes together, minus 2 times 4. This is going to be pretty easy to work through here. So I keep my negative 2. What do I get when I multiply 3 times a negative 2? I get a negative 6. Oops, sorry guys. Okay, so we just call this minus 6 because we're multiplying. Actually, we can look at this like a positive 3 times a negative 2. Here I have a negative 2 times a positive 4, and I would get a negative 8. So what I have is negative 8 minus 8. I'm not using parentheses at all around my numbers. I'm not changing anything to addition of the opposite. I'm just looking at the fact that these signs are actually attached to the number to the right. So when you're doing that, you're thinking of these as, yes, they're being subtracted, but they're also negative numbers being put together. Okay, so you're adding negative numbers together without changing them to addition of the opposite. Okay, so that's going to help you to really fly through problems a little bit better, honestly, as you move along in working with addition and subtraction of integers. Okay, now as promised in yesterday's lesson, I wanted to do number 19 with you today. So before I end the lesson, I'm going to go ahead and look at 19. You can do this by hand, or if you want, I don't have it readily to show you, but I did post on Edmodo. I put some coordinate planes up there, and one of them is labeled lesson 91, number 19. If you've already printed that down, you can put that in front of you, and you can build your graph on that. So you should have already worked through the notes from the investigation 9, so this won't seem foreign to you because you've already listened to the video, taken your notes, and you have a little understanding of how to graph functions. So on number 19, oh dear, I didn't bring the book in here with me. Hold on one second. I do have this somewhere. Sit tight, guys. I'm going to pull this problem up right here. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So what does this say? And I can't make it. There we go. All right. It says 1 yard equals 3 feet. The table below shows 3 pairs of equivalent measures. Plot these points on a coordinate graph using yards for the horizontal axis and feet for the vertical axis. Then draw a ray through the points to show all pairs of equivalents. Okay, so let's go back to my document here. So on 19, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and build our function table in. You're going to have yards and feet. Normally we use X and Y, but we are specifically comparing feet to yards in this problem. We're going to change the names of our axis. If you want to draw this in your notes and not use the coordinate plane that was provided, that's fine. But keep in mind, it is only going to be, this is quadrant 1 up here. That's all we're using. So these are going to be all positive numbers. We were instructed to label the horizontal axis as yards, and we were instructed to name the vertical axis feet. So let's go ahead and do that. They gave us our coordinates. We have our yards 1, 2, and 3, and our feet 3, 6, and 9. That's pretty easy. We know that 1 yard is equivalent to 3 feet. We know that 2 yards is 6 feet and 3 yards is 9 feet. That's no big secret. We know that. So let's go ahead and on our graph, we're going to do yards right down here. We have 1, 2, 3. And then up here, we're going to use the same, about the same spacing. 3, 6, and 9. And this is going to be our feet over here. And then we're going to plot our points. So I have 1, 3. I have 2, 6. And I have 3, 9. And then, keep in mind, we don't have negative feet. There's no such thing. If I ask you how long this desk is, you're not going to say it's a negative 1 foot in measurement. That's not going to happen. It's going to be a positive number. So we don't have any negative numbers, and that's why we can stay in quadrant 1, not to mention our coordinate points are all positive. Then we're going to connect this to make our ray to show what that would look like on a graph. There's the relationship between yards and feet. It shows me that as my yards increase by 1 unit, my feet actually increase by 3 units, 3 feet. Okay, so that's how you would do number 19, and that comes from investigation 9. I wanted to make sure that we did that together as promised. So that one will be done when we meet together on Zoom today. I will see you at 9:15. Thanks so much.